What did your boss tell that got to your last nerve? Told me that my raise was not in the budget and that lazy IT are paid enough, and we play video games all day. He gave himself and all managers a raise a month later. I found a better job, left, gave my 2 weeks, and because he was cheap with IT, lost his website and took him a year to hire or keep anyone long enough. His company lost millions in online sales. His company never recovered and went under. Story 2. We couldn't have asked for anything more from you as an employee, but this job's going to Taylor because he's more of a go-getter. I told this a whole okay. I'll go get another job elsewhere, then and quit immediately. Exceptionally satisfying, and the place has been going down in flames since I left. Story 3. My manager was off recently and left us with no cover. I forwarded something on an email because it's something that only management can raise. Nothing urgent, so figured it could wait and be picked up when she was back. Got a snotty reply less than 5 minutes later, saying, "You know that I'm not in today. Send this to person." I would do that. If you'd actually bothered to tell us that they were covering for you, story 4, can't you just be late to your other job? You have responsibilities here. Yes, and those responsibilities end when my shift does. You have a responsibility to make sure the shift is adequately staffed, but I don't see you doing that. Story 5. My dad passed away. He had been sick, but it was still unexpected. My mom and I had long before booked a 4-week holiday, which now happened to be 1,005 months after his passing. It was perfect timing because I was taking it all pretty badly. When I returned, I had a pretty rough time. I still showed up to work. All my co-workers were very appreciative and understanding, except for my boss. After my first week back, he planned a meeting in which he told me, "I really hope all that stuff with your dad finally got sorted so you can focus on work again." I found another job and left 4 months later. Story 6. Working 24-hour shifts on an ambulance. We used to get run to the ground often. On one occasion, we were running calls nonstop from 8 a.m. to midnight without a break. I called dispatch to ask for a break to get some food. There were other ambulances in service, so a 20-minute food break was reasonable. My boss happened to be dispatching, and he denied my request and said, "This is what you signed up for. Just run the calls or you'll be written up for insubordination." Mind you, I've been doing this for 5 years at that time. That's when I realized that private ambulance sucked. I was also his top EMT, and for him to say that was the final nail in the coffin. I got a job with a hospital shortly after working as a tech. Best decision I've ever made. Story 7. My boss said to me several times in our last meeting, "This is our field, not therapy," when discussing projects I've been working extremely hard on. Other coworkers were present. He is known for never, ever being satisfied with the rate of progress in a project, which is something I've come to accept, but to imply that I'm treating my job like some kind of relaxing recreational activity is just delusional on a galactic scale. Still in 2 minds about whether to book a meeting with him soon, where I can explain just how incredibly condescending and unprofessional I felt this comment was, and how I never want to hear it again. Story 8. Worked for a guy who ran a small coffee distribution business. Sold and maintained espresso machines, distributed coffee and tea for some good quality sources. He was pretty good at the mechanical side of things, was definitely a coffee snob, but had absolutely no organizational skills and was a terrible hoarder. I was there to organize and help the business run more smoothly, but it was an uphill battle. He ran it out of his own home, and it was a mess. The warehouse was full to the brim with junk, and he wouldn't let anyone touch it. He wouldn't even put a trash can in there. You could barely get to the product, and he would get angry when you implied that the junk needed to be tossed. He had a ridiculous amount of uncollected invoices because he couldn't organize to save his life. After a few months, I was able to successfully collect about $30K in invoices that his clients probably never even received bills for. He had a lot of small parts on hand for repairing espresso machines. But because different companies had different names for the same part and the fact that he was a mess, he never had an accurate accounting of inventory. I streamlined the inventory system and, based on his suggestion, implemented a digital system so he could account for inventory used on site. The problem was he never used the system, and so our inventory was never accurate. When I would point this out, he'd go off about how he couldn't be bothered to do it while he was in the middle of fixing something. He got a contract at a local event to set up a small coffee stall. Getting the equipment and supplies was an absolute nightmare. The equipment was in the warehouse, and he refused to let anyone touch anything in there. When the perishable supplies arrived, there was no space to store them in his fridge because he was a hoarder. I offered to clear the fridge, but he got attitude and wouldn't let anyone touch the contents that were who knows how old. He ended up angrily doing it all himself. When he finally got the stall set up, he tried running it, but he was too anal about the quality of the espresso and didn't have the barista skills to quickly dial in the flavor. I watched him take an order for 2 espressos and then proceed to pour, then toss out about 7 consecutive shots before he was happy with serving it. He probably threw out more shots than he served, and the only thing that was served consistently was the nitro cold brew. It wasn't until he brought in a barista he knew that the stall started to run smoothly. The next day, he careened at me about how he felt that somehow the fact that the stall was run so poorly was my fault. I got up, put my key to the business down on my desk, told him never contact me again, and walked out the door. Story 9, independent contractor. Here we renew our contracts at the beginning of each year. Was recently told to sign the contract and return it on the spot, that it should only take 10 seconds, that I have no need to read it. Like what? Yes, I'm gonna read it. Story 10. She said that I did horrendous on a project to one of my coworkers behind my back. I literally did a perfect job since I knew she would be holding me accountable, and it showed that she never checked my work, but had a narrative about what she was going to say. Story 11. I am a manager, and she is my direct boss. She told me to tell a new hire, we don't discuss wages here. While I understand her thinking, I find making this statement and request to be wildly inappropriate. Story 12. Introduce me to the new manager. I'll try keep it short, but bit of backstory. The company has 3 stores, call them A, B, and C. A is the original store, and also the depot. So it's always been the highest earning store. It's also the biggest with 5 fitters, 5 office staff, and 2 warehouse staff. B is the smallest store and has the worst earnings due to its location. It gets less foot traffic. It has 1 office staff and 2 fitters. C is the newest and farthest away from the CBD, but its location allows little to no competition. So it does well. It has about 3 fitters and 2 office workers. I worked at A for a few years, doing 3 people's jobs, but only got paid for the 1 role. One day I asked for a pay rise as my rent had gone up. Extra while we're 30, and got rejected. The manager and I also kept clashing heads, so I moved on. About 2 years later, I got a call asking if I was looking for work, as the manager's role is becoming available at a and they were really desperate for me to come back as I have the most knowledge for the role, as I was basically doing it before I left. I agreed to come back but refused to work at while they still had the old manager there. So we all decided I'd go work at B for 9 months as a fitter, then move to a as manager. After about 7 months working at B, we got an email from the top brass, congratulating us on a job well done and blah blah blah. Confused. We looked into it and turns out we were projected to surpass a 4 annual income by a large margin. Has never been close to happening before. The following week's Tuesday, I had a call from the CEO asking if I could move to a earlier than agreed as a fitter, then once the manager leaves, he'll start that role. I figured may as well, considering it's only 2 months until I'd be there anyways. The following Thursday morning, the CEO walks into B with someone by his side. I assume makes sense to put my replacement in here as early as possible. We greet each other and about 2 minutes into the convo, the CEO comes out with, yeah, so basically I'm just showing him around the stores before he starts up next week at a... Confused. I say, oh yeah, what have they got you doing over there? To which the CEO replied, he'll be taking over from Mike, the old manager. I thought of every reason as to what I did wrong, but nothing made sense. Turns out the new guy was an old friend of the CEO who had just lost his job and was looking for work. Story 13. He hired me as a team lead, but was never actually around, so I just did most of his day-to-day job for him. He was an absentee dad to the program who would just wander through the office once or twice a week, sprinkling bullcrap tasks on everybody, and then vanish back into the ether. We would complete his busy work and then email him asking for feedback and never get it. After I started in October, this went on until he scheduled a meeting just before lunchtime on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. And the team cornered him in this meeting and made him answer all of our questions. I got the team to make slides and everything, so he couldn't just skip over things he didn't want to talk about. He grew increasingly irritated by us wanting him to tell us how to do the crap he asked us to do until he just got up and walked out. as the kid who was presenting was mid-sentence. We thought this meant we were taking pho, but he cruised back into the conference room a minute later to find us all checking our phones and really let us have it for being on our phones and not paying attention in his meeting. We all kind of looked at each other and grumbled a response, and one of the guys looks up at everybody all stunned and says, "My aunt just died. I have to go call this funeral home in Chicago and figure out how to get her back to Mississippi for a funeral." Assbag looks him straight in the eye and says, "That's not what we're working on right now. You need to put your phone down." The whole team just kind of stares at him in disbelief for 30 seconds and gets up and walks out. I sat there with him long enough for him to stare at his notebook, and I shouldn't have done that, and get up and leave the office. He never apologized to the guy. That was 2 years ago this month. The program has had 300% turnover. Assbag ghost quit. The customer canceled the program, and the team went from $225 at its peak to $4 as of yesterday. I quit in August. Assbag told a guy I'm still friends with there that he was going to try being nice at his next job because being a tyrant wasn't really working for him. Story 14. Off the clock on my unpaid break, I would often drive to the bank in a fairly busy shopping square about a mile away from my work. The day I'd had enough and quit, an elderly woman had gently backed into me, not looking, while reversing out of a parking space while I was in a standstill line to turn out of the parking lot on my unpaid break. There was no damage, but I was furious because I'd just gotten my car back from the body shop a few days prior. And it was expensive. I didn't confront the older lady, and I wasn't late getting back from my break, but ranted about the situation and her lack of awareness to my coworkers when I returned and clocked back in. My boss then popped her head around her office door and stated, "Oh, no one is allowed to leave the property on break anymore." I got an email this morning from corporate that they changed the policy. It's a safety risk, and things like that can make you late getting back to work too. I demanded to see where the policy was changed, and she said she would show me before I left work, but she had to answer an important phone call, so couldn't show me right then. A few hours later, another manager told me as I was getting ready to clock out that my boss had already left for the day. I told her to consider that my final shift, as they cannot dictate what I do if I leave the property on unpaid time. If they weren't paying me, it's my personal time, not company time. I never went back. Story 15. This was a long time ago, so I can't remember the exact words, but I'll paraphrase. Long story short, it was the third week where, as I was finishing up a crazy dinner shift on a Saturday, the night shift cook called out. I had used to run the night shifts, so the previous 2 weeks I was asked to cover through the night, essentially a 20-hour shift of cooking and cleaning, and I had agreed to it. I understood that the night shift cook was being placed in a difficult situation due to a failing relationship. I respected him, so I was okay with covering. However, on this third week, I just didn't have the energy or desire to do it. I said no. That would have left the current shift's manager as the one responsible for covering or closing, if that is what they decided. A short while later, the shift's manager comes up to me because the GM wanted to speak to me. He begins to berate me over the phone, saying how I was lazy and not a team player, how I was screwing him over, and that I wasn't worth the money he was paying me, so he was going to knock me back down to minimum wage. I told him to make it 0 instead because I quit. The next day, I got a phone call from his boss asking me if I'd reconsider or even just work at a different location temporarily. I declined the offer. Several months later, I got a call from one of my former coworkers to catch up. I asked him how things were going there. He told me that he had no clue because he quit as well. According to him, they tried having him take up all of my responsibilities, and he told me that he never realized just how much I did until they were trying to pull the same crap with him. There are so many more layers to my time at that job, including fraternization, sleeping with a different manager, as well as preying on young female employees, and I'm fairly certain that my boss was stealing from the business. He was definitely breaking some labor laws as well. I naively only reported him to HR as I left because I didn't know any better at the time. Story 16. I worked at a troubled teen center for girls. We got a new intake on the weekend, which usually doesn't happen. Client came in after parents dropped her off. Turns of she was high as crap, and they just told us, just let her come down and watch her. FYI, we were mentors, not medical staff. I, being male, was tasked with a one-on-one with her, which shouldn't happen. It should be a female. I was not comfortable with this. We didn't know what she was on. no medical records yet or history. I started to get mad and started messaging managers directly, telling them to hand over her information. Something was telling me to not one-on-one with her. What this means is I watch her, walk wherever she goes. And if she tries to hurt herself, I have to restrain her. Again, something like this should have been female staff. Now, why did I get a weird feeling? Turns out this girl had been abused by a male around my age and height. I was pissed the hell off. This girl was high and had this past. She could have made up a lie about me and screwed my life up. I was livid with Boss. I was one of their top mentors and had been there for a while. I loved taking care of these girls. I saw them as my kids. But thanks to horrible management, he put me in a position I couldn't forgive. My contract stated I could quit at any time without 2 weeks. I called my boss, explaining everything. All he said was it was unacceptable. I said I quit and he tried to get me to stay. I hit him with, "Will anything change in 2 weeks or a month?" He was silent for the response. I said, "That's my answer. I quit because you can't keep your staff safe." Everyone I worked with quit after. They all agreed with the safety concerns. I was the last person anyone thought would quit. So it was a huge shocker to the facility when I left. Those troubled girls deserved so much better. Also, you learn a lot of girls there because some parents just can't parent. So they blame the girls and send them to these centers. Story 17. And now you're wasting mine. Go to break. It was another day opening the fast food place. Replacement manager had cut down morning staff, so I was doing what used to be 2 jobs. It was truck day, so freight had to be put away too. There was a box of drink trays on the load, but there wasn't space on the shelf where they normally go. I slotted it in the next adjacent spot and kept on working. Got the restaurant open just in time, yet again. Barely putting the doormats into place as the first customers are coming in. It was like that a lot. I'm ready to go on break, so I find the boss in the stockroom. She opened the box of drink trays and is getting them arranged onto the available space, on their usual shelf. She wanted to know why I put them there, and I told her it was to save time. Her response is at the top of this post. This is a technically correct situation. In a perfect world, I would have opened that box during freight and got the items arranged neatly into the available space in the shelf where they normally go. But it's not a perfect world. I'm doing the job of 2 people to get the store open and barely making it in time most days. There are plenty of slow periods later when things can be tidied into perfection, or even just leave the box on the adjacent shelf until more space opens up. It doesn't hurt anything. It really pissed me off how petty it felt. The previous manager of the store was much more involved in making sure the place was up and running smoothly. She wouldn't hesitate to jump in and make sandwiches or anything else. The new one would just lean on the frosty machine with her schedule clipboard in hand and wander out back for frequent smoke breaks. The difference in support was noticeable and frequently annoying. And now I'm wasting her time? I went on break stewing on the whole thing, trudging over the local Starbucks. Eventually noticed it was definitely past the 1.5 hour mark, which helped settle things. Walked back inside, told my manager, I quit, goodbye, and turned and walked away. Never had to see her again. Story 18. Didn't tell me directly, but I heard it about me a few feet away. Blank will do it. He always does it. Yes, the hell I do it. I do it all the damn time, because nobody else does. And if I don't do it, then nobody else will. And when they do a bad job. Story 19. I'm nearly 30 weeks pregnant, extremely tired, extremely uncomfortable, and sore. My boss told me to act like I want to be at work, to put on a game face and smile more. I let the intrusive thoughts win and I lost my crap. Story 20. I'm an eye doctor and I was eyeballing, pun intended, a practice to purchase after 15 years. In one practice I did not wish to purchase. The owner, my boss, was aware of my disinterest in her practice. I was working a half day a week in the prospective practice and making solid plans to move forward with contract and bank loan for the new place. Suddenly, out of nowhere, the 2 owners of the prospective office called me to tell me that they had a buyer. This was literally the day I was going to apply for my loan and sign contract. The bid was not something I could match. I could mortgage my home, cash it out, add it to my bank loan, and I would still not remotely meet the new bid. I asked them how this could happen, and they told me that they were scouted by this large company and had an interaction with a person I was very familiar with. This person was the spouse of my current employer who recognized that I might buy this practice and deliberately recommended this location for the group to buy so that I wouldn't leave the practice. At the time, I was making the bulk of the money for the practices and managing them all clinically. I left, of course, but I did confront them about it, to which they confessed that they knew about my plans and they deliberately interfered. Joke's on them. That group hired me, and now I'm making more than I was working for her and working fewer hours. Story 21. Not my direct boss, but an office manager at my job sends out hostial messages whenever she's in our office about things we aren't allowed to do anymore. And 2 weeks ago, she sent out an aggressive email saying, "We aren't allowed to touch the office fax." Apparently, someone misplaced some important referrals, and instead of telling us where these go or trying to provide training, and sent out a message on high importance and saying only support staff can touch the fax machine. Sounds reasonable until you realize we need to fax sensitive documents to APIS and CPS, and we have a strict policy that states we can't have support staff fax these documents. I called HR and asked why I'm trusted enough to go to clients' homes, but not enough to touch a fax machine. Prior to this, her brilliant ideas consisted of buying a $3,000 stamp machine we can't use because she thinks we'll break it, putting two $2,000 desks in each office when we don't have the staff to justify 2 people in our offices, and spending $5,000 on a laminator. We are a non-profit social service program. Why do we need $5,000 laminator? BTW, it hasn't been used in 2 years. My personal favorite was when she told us men and women can't share an office, made 2 people share an office when we have 4 empty offices, and giving herself an office despite only being in our office 2 times a month. She's an idiot. Story 22. I'm with a non-profit. They asked me to cut next year's department budget by 5%. I confirmed the task and deliverables multiple times and gently pushed back since our expenses scale up with program delivery, and we had a 4 or 5% growth target on top of an approved year of massive anniversary events and programs planned. After losing multiple nights of sleep over it, I delivered the cuts. Then they said, "Oh great, don't worry, it was just an exercise. You manage budgets well." Lost my trust. Story 23. Used to be a baker. One night I was training a newbie how to make baguettes. I demonstrated how to slide them into the deck oven with wood plank, but when she tried it, they went in curved. So I told her to hold on while I straightened them out. 2 seconds later, she shuts the door on my arm while it's still in the oven. My arm at this point is badly burnt, so I call my boss and explain what happened. His first question, "Is the oven still working?" 2 weeks notice the next day. Story 24. Started working at this company where the colleagues informed me on the first day that the manager is really toxic and understands no work-life balance. Tried to ignore and focus on understanding the project. Then things began to unfold. Crazy steep deadlines, leave denials, snarky remarks like, "Don't try to do it, get it done," micromanagement. Literally had to beg for an extra day for every milestone. The worst part is, as soon as I used to leave office, this MF stooge used to call stating a critical bug in the system that needed immediate resolution. I've worked in an hour-long auto rickshaw ride, reached home by 8, and resumed working at 8:05 for a bug that was not even a bug, merely a misunderstanding on the client's part. Mid-year discussions came, and he said, not a team player, not flexible on work timings. I immediately escalated to HR and dropped my notice. Had a 40 minutes discussion with HR, him and the VP about the complaint. That basically led to him getting an well-earned earful. On my last day, dude had the audacity to say, "Keep in touch." The dog in me forced me to yell out, "Let's not." Learned a very important lesson from my 6-month stay there. If you don't set your boundaries, someone will set them for you. Story 25. I had a previous job that expected me to forego medical treatment, and I found that I had cancer after I left. I was often the only reliable person, so I couldn't have time off according to them. At my previous job, I was getting trashed for being a reliable person. I worked 3 months of weekends by myself and had my one request not granted. No one else on my shift was scheduled during that weekend. I got my next request to be told I needed to cancel because management couldn't come in. Nope. I put in on a day that I wouldn't be in on my normal time due to an oncology appointment. I've had no evidence of disease for 4 years at that appointment. Newest manager on the totem pole scheduled me for an hour early that day and nearly double the hours as the next person that week. I showed up when I told them and was told off for being a horrible person. The same manager told me that I was a thief and complained to the store manager about both. While the store manager stood up for me on the thief remarks, I did not get any backup for being expected to skip doctor's appointments. I left the next month. I've had a few more health issues pop up and would be expecting to ignore them to work there. Story 26, I work in trades. Supervisor and I were driving by a project and he said so-and-so works there now and he runs the job. He just got his license and that he doesn't think he knows enough to do it. Without asking supervisor, he proceeds to tell me that I have more experience and years than that job runner. But he doesn't think I could run a job because I don't know enough, I don't know the code enough, and I can't do it because I haven't been trained to do it. Proceeds to ask me, well, do you think you can do it too? Which I replied, I'm not sure I want to, he says. That's not what I asked you. Do you think you can do it? I've been a lead hand ever since becoming a journey person 8 years ago. Whenever put in a position, I've found a way regardless of if I think I can. I've written and passed my contractor's exam as well. I know a fair bit and I'm honest enough to admit things I have no clue on. I've talked to many people about this, and they all think it's just chest puffing and talking me down to keep me where I am instead of climbing the ladder in life. Story 27. Back when I was a nursing student, I was working in a particular ward whose nurses refused to do in physical labor. Head nurse gave me some food and instructed me to bring it to a patient. As I was about to go, the emergency bell rang. A patient hat collapsed in a room. After I finished helping him up, there was just one alarm after the other. I was busy for pretty much an hour. Came back to where I left the food, it was gone. I was happy because someone had finally done something. As I sat down to document all the vital signs I had measured, the head nurse appears and starts to berate me for being incompetent and that I was not able to even bring a meal to a patient. I was 99 upon 9 while done at this point for a multitude of reasons, so I just told her a bit angry that I was drowning in work so deeply that I was about to hit the bottom of the ocean. She looks me into the eye and says that I am like Greta Thunberg because apparently I am unable to control my emotions. I just stood up and left the shift an hour early. Duck this place. Story 28. I laid out exactly how we could transition our teaching staff to virtual teaching, what we needed, and how long it would take. 3 weeks. They ignored me, didn't even acknowledge that I had sent them an email. 4 weeks later, they got around to implementing what I had told them to do without acknowledging anything I'd told them. Then, they let someone else steal my professional development materials and pass them off as their own. When I called them out to the owner, they didn't acknowledge that anything had happened. This was all after throwing money at me to work as a tech consultant. They were worried I would leave, and threatening to fire me at least 3 times if I complained about anything to anyone. Took me 8 months to find another job. I went on a leave of absence, started the other job, and 2 weeks before I was supposed to go back, I told them I would be extending my leave to the end of the year and not renewing my contract. To this day, years later, I'm told my name is spoken only in hushed tones, lest the rage of the owner come upon those who utter it. Story 29. I was hired at a company to help start a 3D printing department as well as help their CNC group. Over a year, the company didn't put money into doing those things. I ended up doing construction drawing. One day, a coworker who knew my background in CNC asked me for help. When I was done with my work, I sent my boss a message saying I was done and let me know what my next task was. He wasn't at his desk, so I ended up helping this other coworker with CNC stuff. My boss ends up coming up behind me asking about what I'm doing. I explained the situation and said I'd pivot onto my new task once given one. I explained I was just helping someone until assigned new work. His answer, we don't work like that here. So I guess we don't help coworkers. Instead, I should have sat at my desk and done nothing. Next day, I walked in handed in my resignation. He was super pissed. I smiled and walked out. That boss had been fired and rehired in the past and has tons of complaints. Within 2 weeks of me leaving, 3 others did as well. Story 30. 20 years ago, I managed a Sonic. I had a cook who was just a struggle. He was a damn good cook. He was always late or calling in though, constantly. I gave him slack because he was in fact a really good cook and my best closer. GM started riding my ass about him, telling me that if he keeps it up, I have to fire him. It's my job to keep him accountable. Okay, so I talk with him, explain everything, and beg him to please be on time and consistent, or I literally have to fire him. The very next day, dude, no call, no shows. I fire him. In retaliation, he goes to my house and slits all 4 tires on both my trucks. Big ordeal. He bragged about it to other people, but when police got involved, his GMA said he was home all weekend and never left. Nothing came of it. I take a week vacation a week later, come back from vacation, and guess who's in the kitchen? The MFR my GM forced me to fire. The GM called him and hired him back while I was gone. I quit on the spot. Story 31. One of my first jobs at a gas station. Had been there a few months when almost everyone up and quit and the manager was out on sick leave. For 3 months, we had 3 employees, including myself, running a gas station open from 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. with only an assistant manager. It was hell, and it seemed like corporate just could not give a crap. Then one day, the district manager comes in, and I've got Metallica playing on my phone connected to the stereo. Does this man thank us for our extremely hard work keeping this ducking store from collapsing? Does he reassure us that help is coming or that we'll at least have a ducking manager soon? No, he looks at me and told us no music but the radio, turn that off. Then goes into the office and shut the door. I swear to God, my heartbeat jumped to 150 and just walked out. The drive home was such a ducking freeing feeling. Story 32. He didn't say it to me, but a friend at work told me what he said to her. After the work group chat kept getting a load of messages complaining about how the night staff didn't do X, Y, and Z, all menial tasks like filling pots with water and lining trays with baking parchment, so morning staff didn't have to do them. I put a message in the chat asking if morning staff could do actual jobs they would regularly leave for the people who came in on changeover. Stuff like emptying the bins, cleaning their work area, or cleaning out empty veg containers instead of leaving them. I thought it was pretty fair to ask them to do the jobs they were supposed to if they wanted us to do extra for them. Anyway, my manager told my friend that I was just pissy because I wasn't getting laid. I quit a few weeks after that when one of the morning staff made me do half of his job for him when I got put on a morning shift one time. Handed my notice in on a used receipt that just said I quit. Story 33. The department I was transferred to, not of my own will, I was told I would be transferring, was originally run by 4 people. Then it was just me and one other person. Then that other person quit. I ended up running a $12 million section of the business, all on my own. I was also doing project engineering when I was only titled and getting paid as a design engineer. I went to my manager and said, okay, I'm running this entire sector of the business. What's my new title and pay going to be? They told me it wasn't in budget right now and we could talk about a raise in November. It was June. I simply said, okay, and got up and left the meeting. I had a new job by July 11th. I love my new job. I get a sizable raise every year. My boss is awesome, and the work-life balance is amazing. I'm literally kicked out of the building at 5. Story 34. Worked at a truck stop Popeyes. Had been there 3 years, was the closing shift lead. Every year I'd get a $0.30, $0.40 raise, only to watch minimum wage go up by the same or more, and just go back to making effectively minimum. We went through a struggle on hiring for a bit, eventually hired on a new cook that was making more than I was. I was being paid less to train this guy than the guy I was training. Asked the store manager about getting a pay raise to something more respectable, and he replied with, "We can discuss it during your review next year." I just stopped going to work after that. In hindsight, it was the best thing that could have happened. I was overcommitted to a terrible job, and my next one I made almost double the hourly wage within 2 years. And just for the record, my beef was not with the new hire. When you're struggling to hire, you absolutely should rethink how much you pay your employees. My beef was with them incentivizing new hires but refusing to reward employees who stayed. Story 35. We were wrapping up a workday and casually talking. It was my boss, my one other coworker, and myself at the time. We were in the detached workshop across the moderately sized backyard from my boss's newly constructed house, and he started casually talking about the trap house he secretly owned and how he would throw parties and get absolutely trashed there, as well as the illicit things that were available there, and all the girls he had slept with while partying in his secret trap house, as his wife and 2 kids were enjoying the pool just across the yard. That on top of the poor handling of scheduling jobs and having to commute an hour one way every day, not knowing if I even had work to do that day. It sealed the deal, and I took a week off to do some contract work and told him via text that I was done. Story 36. Worked for a company that did service on cell phone sites. As a close-out process, when you left every site after completing work, you had to run a diagnostic check through a website that checked alarms and made sure the building was secure. I got a work order to deliver a generator to an empty parking lot for an event later that day. So there was no building to run a diagnostic check on. I dropped the generator off and left and closed the work order. So I got my ass chewed for not running an automated building test on an empty parking lot. Also got my ass chewed by a VP for not topping off a generator with fuel. Except the generator had 0 hours of use on the rental and was already full. They just wanted an excuse to charge the customer for a full tank of fuel. They told me I should have filled my truck's tank with the fuel instead and charged the customer. I got the last laugh with them as I sued them for wage theft and won. Story 37. My workplace is currently understaffed right now, and when I asked my boss if we could hire another staff, his response was, "We'll be all right. You have me and I can always come and help you guys out." From past experience, his help is mostly non-existent. Story 38. Gave me 2 orders the other day. Of the same 2 items, one was 5 pallets, 3 of one item, 2 of another. The other was 2 pallets, 1 item and 1 of the other. I'm inventory manager. So when I went to grab the pallets, I noticed the counts were wrong, so I tell him he claims I'm the only person who has picked that item. I must have ducked it up somehow, which is a big deal since I'm inventory manager. I'm exceptionally good at my job. So he finally gets off his ass to check himself, and what do you know, I was 100% correct. He proceeded to look at me and say, "Well, I just don't understand. How did you duck that up then?" Come to find out, the receiver for the items had 177 cases received on it and not 132, so my boss entered it in the system incorrectly. He never takes accountability for anything at all, even small things, and claims he's the only perfect person alive, and that's not a joke. Story 39. At the time I was a server, I was the only person scheduled from 10:30 a.m. to 12 p.m., and we got absolutely slammed the second we opened, 11 a.m. I was running around like a chicken with no head-grabbing drinks, grabbing appetizers, and I'm not a robot, so I can't do everything at once. So I admit there were times I screwed up. Mind you, there were at least 3 managers on the clock, and didn't help until the second employee came in. But after all that mess, I got a talking to because I'm usually on my game, but that day I screwed up. I constantly. Overhead, the managers softly talking crap about me, so I approached them. That's when I realized I could no longer work there, because that felt like a shot to the foot. I would always do my job the best of my ability, if not above and beyond, and the one day I mess up because it's out of my control, I got shat on. The good thing is, I made about $400 from that rush, not including tip out. Story 40. I'm in a medical profession directly treating patients. The team leaders told me I had to cut certain corners with materials and do it the way they did, maximizing profit while giving a substandard outcome. And I usually had to fix their crap because they refused to see the patients returning with problems. I handed in my notice the next week. Story 41. Not me, but someone close to me. This person's parents had passed away within 6 months of each other. One of the parents was being taken care of by my friend for 10 plus years. That parent died, and it was like a freight train hit this individual. They took a few days off work just to get back into it shortly thereafter. A few months goes by, my friend is just getting back in the groove of things, and the other parent passes away. This death was much harder on my friend since they were so close together. They took another couple days to get their emotions and life together, and the day they get back from their bereavement, their boss says, "Glad to have you back. When are you going to get back to your goals?" Without even checking in on my friend due to the events that occurred. They hounded and hounded my friend to the point she just blew up one day and quit. Story 42. I should have seen it as a red flag in the beginning when he told me we are a family-run business, so it's family first. When I was hired, I told him, "Hey, in 3 months, my kiddo has a 5-day hospital stay." And they said no issues. Week comes up, I set everything up for my projects and schedule a meeting with my boss to give him a day-by-day breakdown. During the whole meeting, he seemed annoyed and didn't want to deal with it. I come back a week later, and my boss walks into my office and closes the door, and he tells me, "I need to get my priorities straight and need to put work first, and I can't miss that many days of work being I was new and it was unacceptable." Started applying for new job at lunch and was gone to another company that is family first in 2 months. Story 43. New guy became our department's boss. Mind you, he wasn't new in the company, just wasn't our boss. Calls everyone in for meetings one-on-one. I used the opportunity to speak about my main problem within the company. Lack of evolution when it comes to earning. My pay was way below what I needed to make with my degree, and I hadn't received a bump up in 5 years, not for my lack of asking. Every year the answer would be, "Can't now. We'll see next year. Just work hard and show us what you can do." So every year I did just that. Took on new tasks, etc. I tell him, and what does he say? "I don't know what you are capable of yet. Maybe next year. Just work hard." My team leader was there, and I looked at her expecting her to at least defend me and tell him what I had done the last year. Nothing. He then told me degrees meant nothing without experience. Been working there for 10 years. And I was just done. Story 44. My internet provider messed up their own cable when burying the line and had to replace it a second time. So I was without internet for maybe an hour and a half. I worked from home and had for a while. It was when I had only an hour left of work. I texted my boss and she insisted I go to the physical office to finish out my workday. I had never been to the physical office before, and it was a good 30-minute drive away. That would give me 30 minutes once I get there to find a spot, set up my workstation, work, and break down my workstation, assuming I was immediately ready to go out the door now. She said, "Too bad, do it anyway. No, I'm sorry that happened to you. No, thank you for being flexible or anything. Just to get your butt to the office." I started putting out applications as soon as the internet came back on, and I'm quiet quitting until I find something better. Story 45. I got written up for finishing a job that had been bid for 4 people over 6 days with a day of travel on each end, with one other person in 2 days. He had personally bid the job himself and told me it made him look stupid. Later that year, he started chastising me about not putting enough detail into my time card, field service, and that he needed to know what I was doing throughout the day. As someone who doesn't like micromanagement, I started adding time blocks for every task I performed throughout the day. When I'd use the bathroom, when I'd smoke, when I'd talk to employees of the locations I was dispatched to, when they'd ask me stupid questions, I'd put what I'd had for lunch. He had to manually approve each time block. After a week of this, much to my delight, I was laid off. I collected unemployment, participated in a paid medical study for 10 days, made $6K, bought a ski pass, and took a winter off. Damn you, Jay. Story 46. I was completely overworked as a manager, where each manager ran a different part of the business. My part required me to do more than any other manager, and I was burnt out and needed help. In a monthly meeting discussing why my department was or wasn't making money, I asked that since I know we can't hire me an office helper, could I have someone in the office just think about what my department needed for an hour a day? Like help make folders or send emails? My boss, the owner, said that he could think about my department, but he would just think about how much money I'm not making. I took that, went to the store, and bought everything my crews have been asking for. But we couldn't afford with the company. Credit card, applied for another job that day, and was gone within 3 months to the job I applied for. That company is still going, but they closed down my department. They couldn't find someone who could do everything I could do for them. Story 47. We need to think about the team. I work in a customer support role with questions coming in 24/7. I'd been working Wednesday to Sunday, while Monday and Tuesday were my days off. This meant the team had weekend coverage and they could enjoy their time off. In addition to answering incoming questions, I also had long-term projects to support. There would be meetings held on my off days, so I would flex my time from Wednesday, Friday, when most of the team is working. I had been doing this for about a year when my manager retired. The new manager didn't care too much for me flexing my time to support project meetings. He told me, we need to think about the team. When I'm flexing time, I'm not available and it's not fair to the team. I'm 14 people to have to pick up my workload. I had always thought of myself as a team player, working weekends and on my days off to support projects, but apparently I was never part of his team. Story 48. We have a remote satellite office that allows us to stop in, send, receive data, and communicate with the main office without having to drive the 40-60 minutes back to the main office. It's good, but it's become a crutch for the engineers because they know that they don't have to work to a deadline. They can just send through the data at whatever ungodly hour they like. One time, the satellite office was scheduled to be moved. It's not brick and mortar, It's built to be moved around. During that move, the office experienced an acute case of being upside down, with all of the computing and other office equipment still inside. It was brought up in an interdepartmental meeting that, as a result of the whole upside-down office saga, we had lost all capability to communicate remotely and would therefore need the engineers to work to a ducking deadline and provide the data we needed with a suitable lead time. The area manager, an engineer, said, "Well, we're not here to baby people." Story 49. I was working at the Publix deli, had just started in the kitchen literally 2 days before Super Bowl. I told my manager, "Hey, I'm gonna need some help in the kitchen in Super Bowl day, or switch me with someone that has more experience." She never did. Mind you, my other manager, on such busy days, would put two of the best in the kitchen together. Day came, I went in with my Red Bull in hand trying to do as good as possible, but I burnt myself a couple of times and I was starting to get too overwhelmed. I asked her for help and she said, "You should have tried harder." I quit right there on the spot, bought a carton of eggs and egged the duck out of her car. Story 50. In retail, my boss would black out 3 days around major holidays as not requestable time off. I challenged him after he himself would take those days off. He responded with, "I've been here 40 years and have earned my stripes." You haven't earned crap. If you don't want to be here, don't be here. The next Memorial Day, I told him 3 months in advance I wouldn't be available that week, and he said, "Don't let these blackout days mean anything to you." And I said, "No, they really don't. I'm not going to be here." Man, he flipped his tits and stormed out for the rest of the day. I also took my time off that week. Now, just this past week, he came in and told us he's retiring and a manager from a store across town will be taking over. I get along with this guy so much better. A 2K plus year salary bump to boot. May have another 2K coming after the holidays. Good way to start the new year. Story 51. During college, I worked at the bookstore on campus, and most of the employees were extremely lazy. I'd grown up on a farm, and I remember the first day the other employees telling me not to work so hard, and I politely explained that this was not hard work. There were days I'd finish projects solo, why they just stood around and talked. Eventually, my yearly review came up, and the manager there told me I'd taught bad habits to other employees, and it took a lot to not comment how to work. So I just quit within 2 weeks. Within a month, he was asking me to come back, but I just thought, if he couldn't recognize who actually got stuff done, he wasn't worth working for. Story 52. My team essentially runs projects for various areas of our organization. I was in my skip level 1-1, meeting with my VP, and she told me my team and I are not liked in our organization because we follow up on items that are due for our projects. We were literally told if someone owed us something for a project with a critical deadline, we weren't allowed to ask for it or even remind the person that their item was due. Story 53. I worked as a new manager, and we had a few problem people. We were working to get their pending tasks down to a reasonable number. During a meeting, my boss goes to my counterpart and asks, "What have you done about bad employee 1?" He says nothing yet, and my boss remains silent. Then it was my turn. "Oh, I see bad employee 2 has less outstanding tasks. What are you doing?" I explained that I'm sending 10 tasks a day to be completed on top of their normal tasks. Well, 10 isn't enough. I quit the next day without a job lined up. Like Karen, I'm the only one doing it, and you didn't say crap to the other supervisor who said he has been sitting on his hand for 2 weeks. I now make 30K more 2 years after that. Story 54. We were doing a performance review, and I got a bad mark because I was late on an annual project. I told my boss the project was extended 2 months because we added a bunch of additional parameters at the last minute and showed him the emails, stating the new deadline. He said, "Regardless, I missed the initial deadline. I was done because I felt they just need something to give me a mid-review." Story 55. I won Engineer of the Year for our entire region. In my year-end review, I told my boss, "These are the things I think I need to improve on, and here is my plan to do it. What else do you have for me?" He said, "Nothing. You've done everything I've asked and then some." So I said, "Cool. Would that performance come with a promotion to the next tier?" His response was, "No, we can't promote you 2 years in a row." Flash forward to one of my coworkers, who absolutely deserves it, was promoted again after being promoted last year. So apparently that guy can get jumped twice, but your Engineer of the Year with no feedback given whatsoever is stuck in HR purgatory apparently. Story 56. It was my second day, and there was a pin in my apron pocket stabbing me. And as she was telling me something, I reached my hand in my apron pocket to try to fish out the pin that was stabbing me. She says instantly, "Get your hands out of your pockets. I cannot stand when people stand like that." And I said, "This pin was stabbing me." I was 27. I didn't go back the next day. It was off-putting to me to be spoken to like that story 57. One time at band camp, my boss tried to embarrass me in front of my team that I had done my work incorrectly. I was being bullied by her too at the time. My blood was boiling. I had to pull her aside with another project manager present and to explain what I had been asked to do and that what I had completed was accurate and correct. She did not apologize and left me feeling enraged at her stunt to embarrass me in front of the team that I managed. Story 58. I worked at a Payway Asian diner. I was in charge of training people for management positions. On Valentine's Day, we were doing a B1G1 event and had lines wrapping around the restaurant. Our entire staff, but me, one wok chef, and a guy I was training for management called out. So we were very stressed. I was on my period and needed to change my tampon. I was taking order, doing prep, and running orders. I told my manager that I needed literally 1 moment to use the bathroom because of my period, and he screamed at me to hold it and how I'm causing trouble for no reason. I had to explain to him that it's unhygienic to not change it working in a restaurant and that I can't physically hold it. He cut me off halfway through to scream at me again that he didn't care. I walked out and never looked back. Duck you, Reggie. Story 59. My dad had been living with cancer for a year and then got the terminal diagnosis. I took a leave of absence for 4 weeks to get as much taken care of as possible during that time because my mom was in no condition to manage finances, end-of-life care, and all the heavy stuff that came with it. I helped with the cremation, care, and arrangements. I also performed the service for his funeral from start to finish. It was a lot, to say the least. My boss called me at 8:30 the morning after the funeral to ask when I was coming back to work. I worked alongside him for 12 years. He never even showed up to the service. The rest of the team, plus people from distant offices, even came. I quit with 2 days' notice and changed careers. Story 60. My senior PM and I were on a project together and needed to put a PPT presentation to a city agency. I put it together, sent it to my PM, and he never got to reviewing it at the end of the week. The presentation was fine and hit all the points. Him and I get called in to do a run-through with my PM's manager on a Saturday. This manager was slowly making its life into my PM and I's projects for some reason. Lo and behold, this other person was nitpicking this and that and said it was bad work and basically scolded us like children. That same weekend, I took a step back, looked at our financials and said, "Duck it. I don't need this job for this bullcrap I'm going to endure with this other manager." The very next Monday, I handed in my resignation and took a year off working. Story 61. On a training exercise, the boss called me a useless piece of spare furniture because there was nothing for me to do until later in the task. I was specifically trained for a certain job and couldn't do anything until later on. I just said, "Wow, okay," and went to sit in my vehicle. It came to my part in the task, and I tried to stay professional as I could and advised him on what needs to happen. He undermined me and told me how he wanted to proceed. Not unusual, it happened a lot. Being the subject matter expert, usually I persist until it's done my way. In real life, I could save lives, including his. I didn't this time, and he got the biggest shouting at for not listening to me. He apologized after and said that he should have listened to me. My reply? "Don't worry about it, I'm just spare furniture." Story 62. Repeatedly called me and my team out to the whole business for not fully completing our deliveries. Not only what he was saying wasn't true, but everything was completed 2 months prior to his emails, and he never bothered to even check. When I informed him that everything was completed 2 months ago, he doubled down and said that what I delivered was never shared out. I had to respond again saying that the deliverables were shared directly to my boss 2 months ago, and he never shared them out. Story 63. When my boss refused to see that one of the dispatchers that everyone else complained about was the problem. But we were the issue for having the problems, said dispatcher constantly micromanaged and needed to be involved in everything. True final straw was me taking a phone call, the dispatcher interrupting me for info about that phone call, put the customer on hold while she explained everything for 5 minutes, and I listened. After she was done talking, I said, "I don't appreciate being interrupted while doing my job." Also, everything you just said in the last 5 minutes has literally ducking nothing to do with this phone call. If I need your ducking help, I'll ask for it. Go back to your ducking desk and focus on your own crap. Next day, I got written up for insubordination and put my 2 weeks in with no job lined up. Story 64. Chef boss once said I was a line cook, that he didn't think I was working hard enough because he didn't see me running around in a panic during rushes. I pride myself on having my mise-en place prepared well and can multitask very well, so I am not stressed out and can focus on making sure the focus is on the food quality as quickly as possible without running around like an idiot potentially causing an accident or making a mess. He said he didn't care and wanted me to move around more despite my chit times being excellent. Quit very soon after. Guy ran a horrible kitchen, but it was close to home, so I gave it a try. Story 65. I was 16 working my first job, and my 42-year-old male coworker was harassing me every day. He would constantly try to get me to go home with him, go to the bathroom, get my personal phone number, vent to me, and would make inappropriate jokes about sex and how I reminded him of his girlfriend to me. After I directly confronted him, didn't work. I told all 5 of my managers in an email, and none of them responded, so I called one of them asking if they got it. He said yes, everyone read it, and then told me, "He's a good guy. He's married, and we've known him a long time. He's just joking." I quit on the spot, and my father went inside shortly after and screamed at the manager who told me this. Unfortunately, the guy who was harassing me wasn't there. Story 66. Jealousy and lack of gratitude just made me work harder, smarter, and stronger. His bosses and company leadership respected me and appreciated me, and my boss would get infuriated because he wanted the credit. But fortunately, we had leadership that saw my impact on the P&L, which afforded me to receive large bonuses and accolades and recognition in meetings and company celebrations. He hated me for it instead of being proud of me. It motivated me to treat my employees much better, in which I would share my bonuses with my subordinates to show appreciation for their hard dedication. And their work gave me the recognition and made me look forward to going to work every day just to crush his fragile ego. Story 67. I'm a union rep for the steelworkers and was stopping him from doing union work as a salary employee. I told him it states in the contract that he can't do union work and to stop. He looked at me dead in my face and said, "I didn't know that. I don't have a contract book on me at all times." He was sitting across the table from me a year earlier while we negotiated that exact language in the contract. Pissed me off so bad I took a 2-hour lunch. He said, "Lunch is only 40 minutes. Where were you?" I shrugged and said, "Sorry, I don't have a contract on me at all times." He never did union work again. Story 68. Happened just yesterday and caused me to quit. I was calling off today as the weather forecast cast. There was a huge winter storm coming that's supposed to last until noon. It started at 3 p.m. yesterday. I live on a hill that I can't get down when it snows. They made a big deal about it and tried making me come in regardless. I said no, so they told me to come in Sunday instead. I have classes on Sunday and have it set as unavailable on my schedule. So since they clearly lacked any courtesy for my safety or education, I quit. Like, come on. Story 69. Our company name ends in an S. Let's call it Big Products. When we talk about things that are ours, because of that closing, the possessive apostrophe just sits on the end. Big Products new widget, Big Products managing director, etc. Our marketing manager decided that she did not like the way adding the apostrophe looked, so has instructed us to simply stop using it. We've tried pointing out she can't just change grammar for aesthetics, but she doesn't understand. There's few workarounds we've been using, the managing director of Big Products, etc. But that becomes very long-winded and inelegant in text after a few instances. Our choice now for everything is to issue these lengthy, twisted workarounds or incorrectly drop the apostrophe, all because she doesn't like the way it looks. Story 70. Years ago, a couple of decades ago now, after several years of 1% and 2% raises that were not keeping up with coal, but were necessary because the company is struggling, I found another job and gave my 2-week notice. Later that afternoon, my manager pulled me into his office and offered me $15 to stay. That MF had the budget all along. I left. Story 71. I don't care if you're throwing up in a bin, you're not going home. I was having digestive issues due to extreme stress over custody arrangements, the rights to my son, and a narcissistic baby mama I told him to get ducked, and I left. 2 months later, he called and offered me my job back, even offered a raise. Story 72. Back when I was a nurse. Client was dying, few days left. I had been his nurse for the better part of a month. Constant meetings and convo with his family. This guy's last wish is to have an In-N-Out. I got it for him. He ate it. He enjoyed it. His family came in later that night and thanked me. The next morning, my charge nurse pulled me into her office and chided me for breaking his dietary restrictions. I reminded her he's dying in 3 days. She didn't care. I got a write-up for ignoring physician's orders. The guy died 2 days later, and his family still loved how out of my way I went to get him a great meal. Duck that boss. One of the reasons I left nurse. Story 73. During perf evaluations, there is a metric that goes 1 to 5 for learning new technologies. This particular year, and I had to learn a bunch of stuff for our new systems, since the guys that should have didn't want to learn it. Anyway, I learned that and learned system configurations, a bunch of other stuff to integrate this and that. Managed to understand why our systems were failing, check load for metrics to know how many servers we were lacking, figured out that the original setup was wrong, and we addressed it. Anyways, I gave myself a 5. It was an intense reading year and change in scope for my web dev position. And my boss goes, "But we told you to learn that," and proceeds to give me a 3. I left that place within a year. Story 74. Many years ago, I had taken a single PTO day in the middle of the week to go out with my family. My manager called me and asked me to attend a meeting with the client. When I said I was on PTO, he said he'd cancel the leave if I did not take that call. I quit that job and left the country in 15 days. My visa was tied to that job. Story 75. I had a 1-day substances relapse. After a long stint of sobriety, I was checking myself into Rehab BC. If I didn't, I know I would have allowed it to continue. BC, that's how I am. My boss asked me, "Are you seriously going to rehab for a 1-day relapse? What are you going to do about your job?" I went to rehab, went on medical leave for a month, found another job during medical leave, and I quit my old toxic job 2 days before medical leave was set to expire. I need to add in, I struggled with substances at this job for a long time. It was a toxic workplace. And I spent almost 14 years there. When I quit, it was the most exhilarating sense of freedom I've ever felt. Story 76. Not a bad boss, but an extremely dumb one. That he just got a lucrative contract that paid him tens of thousands of dollars, but meant that production was going to have work double time for the next few weeks to fill the order. He was literally cheering on his way to the car, while I stood outside watching him like a sucker, getting my $12 minimum wage as a contractor, no less. That night, I sent an anonymous report to OSHA of all the things wrong with the place, and they showed up a few weeks later. He was fined thousands of dollars for violations, and since he wasn't a very good boss, he apparently continued to get fined after I left the place because he didn't make the improvements he was supposed to. Story 77. Currently on med leave due to a bully manager. We both worked a report. I was in training for the role as I just picked it up. Manager guided me and verified everything was correct. It came back incorrect, and manager wanted me to take full responsibility for it. I said, "No, you guided and verified. We both take responsibility." Manager then told me I would be checked on everything moving forward. Manager attempted to micromanage me from that point forward. I went to HR, they put me on leave, really messed with me. The anxiety of constantly being blamed for things and in and out of my control made my mental health degrade to the point that I could not work. Wishing them the best. I will hopefully be moved when I return. Story 78. When he started playing games, lying, hiding things from other employees unnecessarily, generally being a self-important, despite his only real role at the company being a go between the tech team and corporate. All he does all day is schedule meetings and either give people new projects that he didn't design and yell at people about the speed of their existing ones. He completely lost my respect when I heard through the G-Vine that he was giving the tech team wrong deadlines on purpose as a test because he believed we were only working at the speed he liked when down to the wire. I found out because he basically bragged about it to someone who then told other people. It didn't work. Because of course his stupid-ass assumption wasn't true. Story 79. I used to work for a company that had us installing equipment nationwide, 300 plus days a year. Each install took roughly 5 to 7 days to complete. And on Fridays, we would get a phone call from our manager, telling us where we were going next and how we were getting there. Anyway, I'm on PTO this week, and Friday my manager calls me and says, I need you to go to this town, 10 minutes away from where I live. So I'm excited I get a week home. I asked what time Monday morning do they need me, and he said 7 p.m. tonight. I told him I was on PTO this week, and he replied with, your PTO was Monday, Friday, 800 and 1900. I found another job the following month, story 80. Had a boss whisper to a coworker, if he doesn't like recent stupid change to policy, he should just quit. For context, I'd been there for years, was a core member of the crew and had a ton of regulars. Leaving work that day, coworker told me and I bailed on that place, so ducking fast. Other people slowly started leaving too. Then they had to go through the COVID lockdown and ended up shutting down. Meanwhile, I had gotten a better job and my life immediately improved, and we managed to come out of the other side of COVID stronger. Don't put up with toxic bosses. Story 81. During my annual review, and technically the only time you can get a raise, my boss informed me I was getting a whopping 5% raise. After telling me how well I had improved and how great I was doing, he showed me the figures, which would only be maybe $1,000 increase in my yearly take-home, meaning I would barely, but really, be able to see the difference. And this was after I did my own research and had realized that the previous 2 years that I'd only received a dime increase in my hourly rate. From there, I was completely checked out, did the bare minimum, and never stayed a minute after 5 p.m. Started looking for a better job right after, and thankfully, moved on to something much, much better. Story 82. In my last job before the current one, I got the, we know you're gonna go that extra mile for the company, but this raise is out of your salary range. I flipped TF out, never step in this place ever again. And for everyone starting their career, early on, nothing is out of your range. If you don't feel rewarded enough, just go find another place. You shouldn't go any extra mile for any company for free. It's a hard-learned lesson you should know, P. I work in the finance field more on the invest side of things, and people who just start in this field really work to get their first footstep in this industry. And some companies just use that to pay much less. Story 83. Years ago at Circuit City. When I put in my application, I couldn't work Sundays. When I interviewed, I said I couldn't work Sundays. At that time, my wife was working 6 days a week, and Sunday was the only day we had to be together. He scheduled me 2 Sundays in a row. I said I couldn't work those days. I did not show up on those days. The 3rd Sunday, he scheduled me. He called me into his office to make sure I came in. I said no. He asked why. I told him what I put above. That wasn't a good enough reason to not work on Sundays in retail. I put in my 2 weeks notice right there. Story 84. I'm gonna have to give you a meets in your review because you've missed so much work. I've missed intermittent days all year because I've been busy taking care of my wife who has breast cancer. She is undergoing treatment and it makes her violently ill for a week or more at a time. I rotate care with different family members. He knows this. Everyone knows this. It is under FMLA, and I'm pretty sure he can't even bring that up in my review. Yes, I'm talking to HR about it. Doesn't change the fact that I'll be leaving. Duck that place and duck them. I've never gotten less than an exceeds at work. I need the raises to keep up with inflation. Story 85. Not a boss, but definitely a few levels above me. I was doing some mandatory training online, just boring company culture stuff, and the system messed up, so my training didn't show as completed in the system, even though I'd completed it. I asked her to go in and manually update it, and after some back and forth, she refused because there was no proof that I'd done it. In other words, I think you're lying. I asked her why my word wasn't enough proof. Now we're both angry. Story 86. Where I work, you're considered entry-level until you're licensed. 4 or 5 years. My boss once said, we want licensed professionals. We can hire entry-level all day. This was in a meeting where most of the staff were considered entry-level. We all had important projects and had learned the rat's nest of organization that is the company. It would take a significant amount of time for a new hire to become proficient enough to contribute. So no, you do need your entry-level staff who have learned the system and are making major contributions alongside the licensed staff. I still work there, but I'm looking to move elsewhere, probably to a suburb of a cooler city, story 87-2 for one special really. Stop trying to prevent issues. Just leave it alone and we'll deal with them when they come up. I work in SaaS software. You're just exaggerating now. When I pushed back saying that ignoring a specific issue now would make customer churn entirely more likely and likely lead to a key employee resigning. Last I heard, that employee is really enjoying their new job, story 88. That me and my coworker exaggerated our overtime hours as a salaried employee. This was after I, the only full-time staff member on the team, was forced to cover my manager's position for 6 months after he resigned. We got roped along month by month while waiting on his replacement to receive their work visa, all uncompensated. Mind you, his solution for overtime was to bank your overtime hours and use them as vacation time later on, without reporting any of this to the supervising university. Finally, after our replacement started working, I asked for 1 day off for my birthday and was ultimately told I was crazy and no one takes time off for their birthday. Story 89. I was in the ICU for 2 weeks and almost died due to not being able to afford my insulin because my paychecks were cut in half due to the cost of my horrible health insurance. That wasn't even covering my insulin because I hadn't met my deductible yet. When I got back to work, the doctors I worked for requested a letter from me apologizing for not being at work and asking to keep my job. They all read the letter and discussed my employment at their next meeting. Absolutely disgusting behavior. And that wasn't even the straw that broke the camel's back for me. I worked for them for another year after that. Haha. Story 90. Whatever you learned in your training is wrong. Only my way is correct. The training was with some certified experts on the topic. Stop asking questions about the requirements. Just do it already. When the answer to the question was critical in defining the approach, everyone is blaming me for all the problems. It's all a misconception. Anyways, he had a team of 7. All 7 left less than 6 months after he joined the company. He then hired new people who nobody is happy about because they lack the knowledge that we all had. And the new people start to be frustrated with him as well, just after a couple months. Story 91. Marketing company, digital, traditional, web. I was the sole web developer clamoring to get things done and making improvements with impossible deadlines and no help at all. Owner wouldn't hire any help, and the ticketing system for customer maintenance requests I developed was too complicated. Customer submits ticket, I respond with time, cost, effort, etc., proceed from there, versus the current process. Phone calls to account managers, who then called me, then a meeting with the about timeline and effort, then more phone and email communication between the 3 parties. It was just a joke. On top of this, the owner didn't find much value in websites. Story 92. I once had a boss tell me he only hired me because I was a woman, for the diversity aspect he was required to have. He also asked me once what my hobbies were, and I said quilting. And he said, "Oh, didn't the early Americans make women do that to keep them busy and out of the way?" And when I asked for a letter of recommendation for my next job area, he asked me what did I do to deserve one. Yeah, duck you. I was a postdoc at the time at Boston University in the engineering school, and that was the most toxic environment I've ever worked in. Story 93 had a new temporary boss who came on board after a couple years of layoffs and 0% raises. She stops by one day to tell me that I need to work smarter, not harder. Look, I was the guy they hired when you wanted smarter, made my early career on it. Her comment hurt. Told her I'd lost 40% of the team in 2 years and hadn't been given any funding for training, so the fact that we had been getting the job done was pretty damn impressive. She apologized. Story 94. Dude constantly tells me to do things that are already done. Did you send that file? Yes. Don't forget to send it. I sent it here as the proof. Okay, but it's very important. Maybe sure you do it. 2 hours later, he'll ask me about it again. Or he makes absurdly dumb mistakes and spends hours lecturing us on why we shouldn't do that. We know. That's why we didn't do that dumb thing. You did, and I had to fix it. Why do I have to get a lecture about your mistake? Story 95. It seems to me that you just come in here, do what you're asked to, and leave. There's no extra in you. Like, dude, this is literally just a job. It's in the description to do what you have to, and that's it. You give me money, I give you my time. Story 96. As the CTO, I gave an estimation of 3 months to an IT development. CEO said it was too much. I asked him for how much time it should take in a meeting of 10 people. In 5 minutes of talking, he didn't answer. I asked again in the same, no time estimation from his side, but he kept saying it was too much. Luckily, I got fired some months later because the development team was too slow. Shaming him when he tried to get involved on the matters also helped. I am really happy now with my current company where the CEO trusts me. Story 97. Told me my pay rise of 50p an hour and I'd waited 6 months to start would actually only be 20p an hour the day before it was due to start. I'd worked there for 5 or 6 years on minimum wage. Got an interview 3 days later, somewhere new, started the following Monday. Best thing that ever happened to me in the end. The next year, COVID happened, and they stopped trading. Now own a home, married, and have kids. Could never have done any of that if I'd stayed there. Story 98. Told me I was not a good leader. I know it is not true. I know the people in my team would follow me to hell and back if I asked them to. And I know they would do it because they respect me. They listen to what he says only because they are afraid of him, and I have to protect them from his toxicity to keep their morale up. I show them kindness, and they show it in return. I have a great relationship with my team, and we all go through great lengths to help each other in any way we can. Story 99. We don't need heroes. That's some kind of buzzword from a book or speaker, I suppose, because I've heard the phrase twice from 2 directions. Yes, a properly built company builds in safety mechanisms and broadens knowledge to prioritize uptime and successful workflows for all users. Or it doesn't, and then reaches out to the same few heroes to bring the system back up while C-level is in a panic. In the gaps, while things are running smoothly, they return to talking about how those few key people can be deprioritized and replaced with cheaper solutions for better profitability. Story 100. Not me, but another employee. Her kid was sick, and she had already used 1/3 of her sick time for staying at home with the kid. That was the official policy here, but every other manager just had you recorded as you being sick. But she had tons of sick time left. So my boss made her take vacation time. That was the last straw for me, as she constantly was inflexible about almost anything. So I ditched and went elsewhere in the company. My boss rushed out a project way before it was ready, and it caused serious problems, and she was canned. Story 101. Came into the editing bay yelling at us for not addressing the notes, while waving around old notes because he hadn't paid any attention to the fact new notes had come in. I almost quit on the spot. Another time he made me send something via slower delivery. The next day the recipient wanted to know where the package was because they needed it. He then yelled at me for not sending it overnight delivery. The thing he explicitly told me not to do the day before. Story 102. Not the boss, but the HR I had to deal with. Asked for a raise, which was substantial, to bring me to the mean for my role in the area. She quoted me back what I earned the year before, like, but you earned X last year. Yup, well under the mean. I didn't quit because I needed the unemployment. But I just became a nightmare. Kept demanding meetings about salary, used reason like cause when I'm around things work as leverage, and finally got the boot. I earn even less than I was on, but I'm a lot happier and less stressed. Story 103. For context, I have a week off now. This Thursday, the chef was ducking me for 40 minutes for not living up to his views of my potential, allowing himself inappropriate comments about my balls. Then, he casually mentions that due to my extreme potential, will also work the next 2 weeks after my return starting at 5 a.m. every day, which I told him I can't do more than 2 days a week, because only I'm good enough to replace a coworker going for a vacation. Well, guess who's making a trip to HR, given quitting notice tomorrow? Story 104. I was told, give yourself a raise and sell more. This was after spending 6 years at said company as their #1 seller by a long shot. And I worked better with considerably more autonomy than the rest of the circle of new hires that cycled through. Never made sense to me how I wasn't more valuable to them. I sold more, required considerably less. I built brands for that company. I left 4 years later as it never got better. They ended up giving my book of business to the CEO's boyfriend, who had taken over management of my team upon my leaving. Story 105. When I had an extremely high fever, I called him up at 7 in the morning to say I won't be able to come for the 9 a.m. meeting. He said, no problem. You can start the shift from 11 a.m. 2. I had an exam, so I asked for a leave on the day. He was fully aware I was applying for higher studies. He said the exam is from 9 to 12, so no issues. I could come for the shift from 1 to 9 p.m. My exam was 3 hours away from the office and my place as well. Story 106. I worked at least 90 hours a week for 2 years, starting their business as operations director. When I asked them to hire someone to help in quality control of our services, they greenlit it, but a month later, they had to have it eat half of my monthly bonus. 4% of total profit went to 2%, which was completely unnecessary. I felt as if I was working for half my pay. More details emerged, and I left after that and started my own company. The company relied too much on my 90-hour-week commitment that all hell broke loose when I left. Story 107. Semi-annual review time. Up until this particular one, I had been getting the 350 raises twice a year. My first review in my 7th year was when the head guy told me that I was only getting $10 because I had been there a while. They were confident that I wasn't going anywhere, so therefore they felt they didn't need to offer me any money to stay. It took some time, but I had a job offer a few months later. The meltdown from him was pretty scary at first, but when I think about it now, it's pretty pathetic and humorous. Story 108. After years of me attending our almost monthly in-person meetings on the other side of the Atlantic, I suggested that maybe the team could travel in this direction and meet over here. Maybe just over a year, or every 20 transatlantic trips for me. His response: we couldn't reasonably ask anyone to travel 8-10 hours and spend part of the weekend flying just to attend our team meetings. Except for me, motherfucker? At that time, I had been on team for 4 years, flown over 100K miles per year annually, Delta Diamond Medallion, and spent usually 100 nights overseas a year, story 109. After I suggested that we can automate work and save everyone lots of time. Instead of going through data manually, he said, no, just do it manually. You have to work smarter, not harder. Story 110. I understand if some of you want to leave. Not long before we found out that the publisher wasn't really withholding our royalties, they were in the company account and the CEO was actually funneling them to herself as a salary. The weird thing about that job is when the accountant started saying she was never the company's accountant and removed certified accountant from her email signature. I think it had something to do with that time we realized she was paying everyone 13 months a year, and we were oddly starting to run out of funding. What was the worst thing your boss ever said to you? Story 1. You're lying. You just didn't want to come to work. You always call out. I was in a car accident with my 18-month-old and totaled my car, even made the paper. Up to that point, I had never called out. Duck you, Nancy. Glad they fired your incompetent ass. Story 2. Handed her a Christmas card, and she goes, oh, is this your resignation? We don't get along, but I try to remain professional and courteous. That comment completely threw me off, though. Story 3. It was 6 months after my son was born, and I just put in new workstations and designed software for my team. Everything was running pretty smoothly, but my son had a health crisis and I was back to getting 4 HRs of sleep each night. My boss started to want me to come in and HR early than the team to resolve any problems before they started their AM coffee. When I protested, as I was already working 10-plus HR days, he took me aside and told me he'd talked to the director and they were thinking about replacing me because of my poor performance. It was all lies. The director was ecstatic with my work. Story 4. You only got this new position because the guy you were considered as a finalist with had a write-up for being late. What really sucked upon hearing that is, I am friends with the other guy. Still am. And I knew for the 3 years I was still there, it chapped my former supervisor's ass to know me getting that job was because he couldn't finagle me out of it, and his hands were tied. When his write-up came off, another position opened up for him after the other guy had quit, so he applied again and he got it, and him and I handled business together and had each other's back. He is a stand-up guy. Just broke my spirit thinking I got it because I was the right choice and worked hard, but nope. On the flip side, after being a cost-cutting termination along with my other 75-80 people, I got a new job within 2 months. Everything and everyone at this place is the complete opposite. 2 months shy of my second anniversary there, my supervisor has me in his office with our plant manager and one of the assistant supervisors, and they tell me they want me to start training for a new position because of this, that, and the other reasons. And to hear him say, the 3 of us had been discussing who it would be, and we believe you're the right person, you're here, You work hard, you care, and you pay attention to details. We have seen you handle changes on no notice. We believe you have what it takes to learn this, and we know we are putting you behind an 8 ball or 5 because you don't have experience with anything else but the laser. But we do not see any reason you won't be able to do this and do it well. I just stood there, and I had a, "Are you sure you're talking about me and not someone else?" reply. And as I said that, I turned around in a joking type of manner to them as if to say, "You sure it's me and not someone else in here behind me?" I didn't see motion. I turned around and had to wipe a damn tear out of my eye. I thanked them all and said I was extremely grateful to finally be recognized solely based off my work ethic. And not because I played the kids' ass game or anything like that. They said, "Well, you've earned it, so." "Congratulations," I said. "Thank you" to all three of them, shook their hands, and walked out. I went right to the bathroom for about 5 minutes to gain my composure. It felt so amazing to finally be recognized like that compared to the other place, which was always backhanded compliments and only going somewhere because someone kissed the most ass. It's been 5 weeks since I've started, and if you were to ask me, I'd say I'm not doing good at it, but they would say otherwise. Mostly because I don't like to brag about how good I am and let my work speak for me. But they would tell you I'm doing far better than they expected for not having any experience at all at this new position and have no regret at all in their choice. Story 5. I don't want you here, and I don't need you here. I never did. It was a small mom and pop operation, though. A family business. My family, my pop. My dad said this to me. Anyways, Merry Christmas, everyone. Story 6. While getting my PhD in astrophysics, I had a totally brand new idea for a research paper. I built a framework for it, wrote some code, and showed some preliminary analysis to my PhD advisor. In his typical fashion, he didn't like the idea because it wasn't his. He called my idea high school geometry that anyone could do, and a waste of time. I went ahead and wrote the paper anyway, and submitted it as a solo author. It got published, and was pretty well received by the community and ended up being an important stepping stone for some of my future work. A few years after I graduated, Jost directly observed my idea, and a bunch of other people jumped onto my research. My PhD advisor called me up and admitted he was wrong, which was extremely rare for him. Ha ha ha. Story 7. Obviously, you don't like yourself, so here are some tips to change who you are. 15 minutes of unsolicited advice on how to act like a real man. Story 8. Can you go through my PC and delete all old, unnecessary stuff? I knew I was going to find some embarrassing, unprofessional stuff, and he stood behind me the entire time. I found stuff. Okay, I have received enough messages telling me to dish. For context, this was 20 years ago, during a summer internship at a US embassy. I was assigned to a division with the head of the department. He was a big guy and kind of loud and intimidating. No nonsense type. The type that would get very angry and yell. He actually took quite the liking to me and tried to get me to be his personal assistant to things that shouldn't be my responsibility. He had asked me to do stuff on his PC before, which is why I kind of knew that I didn't want to look into his stuff. That day when he asked me, I knew I was going to find some stuff. He had me open every file, including pictures. I opened a number of pictures of him naked and pictures of women naked, as well as documents like how to please the clitoris. Nothing horrible, but they shouldn't have been, on his PC. He also was not the type to have any shame, so when I opened them, he would shrug and say, "Delete that." The program was an amazing experience, and I got a lot of great experience. When the summer ended and I had to fly back to the US to continue uni, he flat out told me, "I really like your work ethic. My next post is Afghanistan, and I want you to come with me. I will pay you $200K a year. What do you say?" I didn't take him up on the offer because I was a current student at uni, but sometimes I wonder how different my life would have been had I accepted. The guy was very serious. The request was legit. Story 9. Boss left a signed contract to give to the landlord. I noticed the prices were completely out of whack with the market, so I did some investigating and got some new estimates, talked to the landlord, and he provided a new contract with significantly lower prices, saving my boss literally tens of thousands of dollars. Boss said, "You must have too much time on your hands." I asked for a small raise. The savings would cover my raise 10 times over. He refused the raise, so I found a job that paid me significantly more. When I gave him my resignation letter, he said he'd give me the raise. I chuckled and said he could no longer afford me. Story 10. I didn't make my review after being a leading hand 2024 for a big earth-moving company here in Australia after 40 years working in the heavy-duty mobile plant. Earth-moving. I was told that my technical skills were not up to scratch and was reactive after every swing. I would ask my supervisor if I was up to scratch. They were telling me I was all good and they were happy with my progress. 3 weeks before my review, I started to see a few flaws in behavior. If one of the supervisor, this was a red flag for me if it wasn't their idea. They wouldn't like it yet. It was making my job more effective. It was a no-brainer. People on my swing were talking crap about me behind my back, hence the supervisor was swallowing it hook, line, and sinker. The majority were happy as I lead from the bottom up, which they liked the style of leadership. Most happy to come to work because the atmosphere was good. I was addressing safety issues, which they were turning a blind eye to, yet would put the onus on me, parts and service kits not available all the time, and would have to scrounge to get equipment going. Hence, don't find this normal for a huge company like this. In the interview, the HR lady had no idea what was transpiring, and my termination was predetermined. She reckons no, it wasn't. I could go on, but I'm over it now. And fully time index crypto trading over the last month, it made more money than I could ever imagine. Wage, P&M, $15,000, zero sure trading, $5 growing. What do you think I should look for? Another job where people don't appreciate you for hard work or stuck with the trading. The saying, he who laughs last, laughs best, or he who laughs last, laughs longest, means that the person who is in control in the end is the most successful, even if others seem to have an advantage at first. It's used to suggest that someone who is initially mocked or dismissed might ultimately succeed should I take this company to task and go to fair work, as I have 10 days to log or not. I would like to hear your views. Story 11. This wasn't me, but it was the CEO of the company I worked at about 15 years ago to another employee at our in-office Christmas party. Anyway, there was this really awful tradition of having a Christmas party during office hours just for managers. The other rank and file had to continue working while we were having our party, in office WTF. Part of this party was giving joke gifts to each of the managers. Most of the time, they were relatively benign. An employee who favored stiletto heels was given a pair of Earth shoes. Another employee who enjoyed eating at top-end restaurants was given a gift card to McDonald's, etc. It is important to note it was the CEO himself and his elves, a couple of the younger employees, that planned and executed all of this. So, the final year this party was held, all the gifts except one had been given out. The final gift was for Luke, a manager who was a very traditional guy. He had 4 young kids with a 5th on the way and a stay-at-home wife who cared for the kids, their home, etc. Well, somehow the CEO thought it would funny to give Luke a box of condoms in front of all his coworkers. So he didn't end up with a 6th kid. The room went silent, and you could tell Luke was pissed. He just got up and walked out of the room. The CEO played it off and just told folks to help themselves to the food and drink in the room and continue the party. Why the CEO, who was generally a pretty normal, personable guy, thought this was okay, I will never know. Well, Luke marched straight to HR to complain. That much I know. How it was eventually settled, I do not know. He ended up leaving the company about 6 months later, not too much longer after his 5th child was born, and we never had a manager's Christmas party ever again. Definitely a good thing. Story 12. My cousin surprised me, she lives in England, for my birthday trip, and I hadn't seen her in a decade. I told my boss and asked if someone could cover me for an extra day the following weekend so I could spend more time with her. Keep in mind, someone was in fact able to cover me. My boss proceeded to yell and scold at me for my schedule being so difficult to work around. I was working part-time because I was in college. I explained how I had no idea my cousin was surprising me, and that since I hadn't seen her in 10 years, I wanted to spend as much time possible with her during her visit. My boss proceeded to not care. I started crying. She was harshly yelling at this point, in front of customers, might I add. And she proceeds to yell at me more for crying and making her look like the bad guy, saying how all summer she had to bend over backwards for my schedule. Sorry that classes started back up. The worst part was towards the end of the day, my mom, aunt, and said cousin came to the place of work to meet everyone, and I had to sprint to their car and tell them to leave immediately because of how awful the day was. My biggest regret is not getting in my car and leaving that minute. If that happened to me now, I wouldn't look back. I no longer work there, but still. It was a very sad and traumatic day for me. Story 13. We all know that Jenny was the real reason why Samantha was struggling at work. Said by the boss with a knowing smile. Samantha was a PhD student who had been supervised by the boss, on top of working casual hours for her. Boss told her she would fail her PhD and would never be able to be a group leader because she wasn't smart enough, wasn't a people person, and spoke poor English. It was flawless and barely accented. This was almost a daily mantra, in private and in public. Total ploy to manipulate Samantha into thinking she had to stay working for boss, for peanuts, and be grateful for it. Jenny was Samantha's best friend at work and would go to extra efforts to help share the load and bring her lunch and coffee, would stay back with her and try to lift her mood. Lovely girl. Anyway, one day Samantha organized a meeting with the boss in the boss's office. She yelled, "I can't do this anymore," and cut her femoral artery right there at the boss's desk, and almost bled out before the ambulance got there. Boss spent the rest of the month spreading rumors that Jenny had had a fight with Samantha, and Samantha had been suicidal because of it. Nothing to do with work. She booked a counselor that did one vague group session at our weekly team meeting, then banned us all from talking about the incident for Samantha and Jenny's privacy. Unbelievable.